waiting for my thumbs up from Maddie for this bit. Right. Okay, so I'm going to repeat myself now. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth Econ Teaching Chat on video assessment. My name's Clodagh Jenkins. I'm a Principal Teaching Fellow at UCL, and I'm going to chair the session today. The session is being recorded. It is live streamed on YouTube. So if you have any colleagues who haven't registered, you could send them the YouTube link. The format of these seminars for anyone who hasn't been here is very much conversation. So conversation between the speakers, but also between the speakers and you. So encourage you to put questions in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, Steffi from Warwick is manning the YouTube chat, and she'll pass comments over to us so that we can all see them. And I will take questions from the chat and direct them to the speakers as we're going through. So the first thing I need to do is introduce our two speakers who are well known to me. So first of all, we have Silvia Del Bianco, who is currently in Italy. But this is the joy of having virtual seminars. I think we can have people from everywhere. Sylvia is a teaching fellow in the Department of Economics at UCL and a fellow of our Centre for Teaching and Learning. She started using video assessment in her module for Economics of the Public Sector, which is aimed at our second years and finalists, so it's sort of intermediate level. The group assessment does count towards their final mark. It's worth 25%. And on top of doing the group video assessment, the students have to do an individual essay. And that essay is worth an additional 25%. So 50% of their assessment is around the project, 25% is group video, 25% individual essay. Demetra is at LSE, but we still talk to her anyway, which is the way of the world. She's an associate professorial lecturer in the economics department at LSE. She's a member of the Economics Network executive group as well. The project she's talking about is actually something she worked on at the University of Surrey with Panos, who I think is with us today as well, and Miguel. And their assessment was in a course about contemporary issues in economics. Again, it was assessed and it was group, and it was worth 30%. And she had a peer assessment component. So that's two very interesting examples to look at. Welcome to both of you. It's probably also worth mentioning that both UCL and LSE actually do a video from the very first day with their first years called a first year challenge. So both of them may refer to that as well when we're talking through the questions. So welcome to both of you. Welcome to everybody on Zoom and to everybody on YouTube. I'm going to kick the ball rolling with the chair's privilege of asking a first question. And my question really is for both of you. How did you come up with the idea of having a video assessment? It's quite unusual, and particularly a group one. Sylvia, maybe do you want to kick off?
Yes. So hi everyone, thanks for being here. And well, the idea to me came both from the students' feedback and from the literature on mixed assessment. For what concerns the students' feedback, I've been teaching this module for 2 years now. And in the first year, students told me that the module was very traditional, and they wanted closer links to public policy. So I merged this students' desire with the literature on assessment, and I came up with students having to make a video on a public policy issue.
Thank you. And Demetra, why did you come up with the idea?
Well, at Surrey, this particular course, Contemporary Issues in Economics, grew in scale very rapidly, almost doubled in size to 270 students. And the original assessment, which was an essay, became really unmanageable to actually have the capacity to grade it. also became very stale. All the essays were very similar amongst themselves, and we just felt it was a little bit static. And around at the same time, the Royal Economic Society introduced its video competition. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to, on the one hand, create a group project that would bring down the assessment to 45 pieces of work, make it more manageable, more creative, and then we would have an avenue for our students also to enter the competition. So it was a combination of those things.
And what was the sort of objective behind it? So I can see that you thought about what would be good for students and for the markers, but did you have sort of particular learning outcome in mind?
Mm.
Sylvia, maybe?
Yes.
Any of you?
Well, for me, I had two main objectives. The first one was, as for any type of assessment, to test the student knowledge. So in this specific case, their ability to apply economic knowledge to a real world problem. The second objective was the one of students gaining some skills that could be used in the job market, or for getting a job, or for being good in a job. And I was mainly thinking about, as Dimitra said, about creativity, about their ability to work in a team, because this is a group assessment, and also their ability to get more conscious about time, so time management skills. So testing the knowledge and getting some transferable skills.
So I think that links really nicely to the employability seminar we had last week. But when we've talked about the first year challenge, and certainly when I've thought about doing this, I'm a complete technophobe, and that's probably putting me off. And I was wondering, Dimitri, have you had any concerns about going down this road, either practically or pedagogically?
Well, at the outset, I think we had two main concerns. The first one was that students might struggle with the technology. That was, we perceived that could be a big barrier. So, and actually we gave them very little guidance. Maybe we pointed them in the direction of some open source video editing software, but pretty much left it open. We didn't want to sort of show them even some examples, so as not to sort of steer them in a particular direction. This turned out not to be a problem at all. It turns out our students have the wherewithal to create videos without any particular difficulties. That didn't come up as an issue at all. Okay. The second concern we had was really about free riding. So this was a first year compulsory course, quite large, and there was some concern that in these groups, some people wouldn't do the work. So what we introduced to sort of counter that was, we call it peer assessment, but I don't know if it is as such. When they submit the work, they have to submit a document where they indicate the contributions of each individual, and they can indicate whether it was even contribution or uneven, and if it's uneven, the percentage, and an explanation as to why they have agreed on these contribution scores. And then the video was graded as a whole, and then there was a pre-announced formula for adjusting the grade on the basis of the contribution percentages. So you could have different members of the group ending up with a different grade for this component, even though they worked on the same video. So it wasn't sort of a one grade for everybody in the group. If everyone, of course, had an even contribution, they got the same grade. But if someone contributed only sort of, much smaller, it would scale up or down. And we had examples in the guidance of how it would scale up or down, so that they could know that. And you might be wondering how many actually declared an uneven contribution. About half. So it wasn't a rare event, half of them. But, no disputes, but uneven was about half. Yeah.
Excellent. So, Dean, are you happy to unmute yourself and ask your question orally?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether there were any particular skills that you were looking to assess through this video idea, which I think is an excellent one, that perhaps you didn't think could be captured through more traditional assessment means.
To who's answering that?
I don't mind.
Well, well, I think that the video put forward, can show the degree of independence better than any other form of assessment. So the way in which students organize their thoughts, the story, it allows probably more degrees of freedom than a traditional assessment, even if probably the main scheme is very similar, because they have to put forward an argument and support it. The way in which they can do that is freer in the sense that they can use much more media than just words. So using visual, music, graphs, all these layers of communications can be used. And I think this is extremely valuable, especially for our students. They are digital natives, so they can really show up also their passion. Well, this is what I think.
Yeah, can I just
So Fabio has an interesting point on that. And sorry, Carlos, and I'll get back to your question in a minute. But Dimitri, you wanted to say something before I
just wanted to say that one of the objectives of our task was to communicate to different audiences. So that so ours was about communicating in a non-technical way the sort of economic ideas. And I think the video lends itself to that. So if this was part of embedding skills of sort of direct, analyzing economics for different audiences, this was kind of the more layman audience, and that fit quite well, I think. So that was a skill.
That works well with those kind of IFS public heads videos, doesn't it? It's that kind of thing. So Fabio had made the point that he was surprised that you didn't need to give technical support. Dimitri, I don't know if you want to comment on that. Do you think LSE and UCL students are different to UEA students, or?
Sorry, remember?
Sorry, of course. Yeah.
No, we did. So we did give them a few technology options, but we did say it didn't have to be brilliant. We had some marking criteria that indicated that the actual we actually put percentages, and in terms of sort of the aesthetics had a relatively small percentage. It was much more important to show knowledge, understanding, analysis. So maybe they understood this wasn't a beauty contest, but they were very creative with it. We did give them technical support on things like how to upload it onto our virtual learning environment for it to be marked and things like that. But it didn't come up as an issue.
And just to clarify, Fabio has said it's not an issue at UEA either. I wonder if we should be getting the students to teach us how to do this now, if we are all going to be recording screencasts for online teaching. Let's just go back to some of the practicalities. So we've got some questions. Carlos had questions about actually how you set up these video assessments. So things like how you decide how many people to put in a group, whether you assign them to groups or they choose groups, how you decide, Sylvia, in particular, that split between individual and group component. Sylvia, do you want to start on that?
This links to the concerns we had. Well, for what concerns the free riding issue, I've tried to build incentives rather than rather than punishing cheating. So this was my strategy. So I decided to do the assessment in 2 bits. So the first one was group work and the second one was individual work. And I didn't have anyone saying my classmate or my group mate did not contribute. It was really amazing to see how students work well and evenly together, having this incentive of doing the individual work. For what concerns the other part of the question, that is the practicality, well, I've done it I decided that each group was around 4 people because of the numerosity of the tutorials we have. So there were 3 to 4 groups in each tutorial. And then I assigned them, well, I guided them a little bit more probably than what it has been done in the other example, in Dimitra's experience, because this is an assessment for a module in economics of the public sector. They need to discuss a policy issue, and these things are extremely complex. So they need to be a little bit guided. And I've created 3 questions, and these questions have been accompanied by a sort of research toolbox in which I've provided them with a motivation for such a particular question and some references, as well as some prompt questions to inspire them. And the questions have been allocated in the very first tutorial just randomly. We did an extraction of the questions. Okay. And the students were happy with the randomness, apart one group who had a strong preference for a specific question, and I allowed them to go for it.
So there's quite a lot of questions, including one from YouTube and various other people about generally about how you set marking criteria for video assessments, but in particular, I guess some angles that people are poking at on. One is whether you make a distinction between marks for the content and marks for the production quality, and whether you make a distinction to that some people work on the economics and some people work on the video creation, or you make sure that everybody does the economics and or the video creation. Might be, Dimitra, do you want to have a start with that? And Sylvia, you can add if you want to.
Okay, well, this was a first year, first term course. So it was more, and it's very thematic. So in the sense that every week was a different contemporary issue, and they chose one to do their video on. And then later they would have an exam. So I think we were a bit less concerned that there might be some people who contribute less to the economics for this particular setup. And yes, I presume that there would have been some individuals who did more of one than the other. So we didn't specifically request, I know that in some other places, they request a log of exactly who did what when. We didn't request this. We requested, we did have a breakdown. So analysis had a weight of 40%, knowledge and understanding 20%, and so on and so forth. We did ask for a separate document with references. So we did understand that the video itself might make statements and claims and quote things that are then not cited. And there was some concern about is that backed up by evidence, these things that are being claimed in this video. So students did have to submit a bibliography or sources and alongside, sort of to try and teach them that, you can't just arbitrarily state things. But obviously you couldn't put things running along the video at the bottom. So they gave us a document to match that up. Now, I don't know who contributed what to which project, but about the size, the very first year this was run, the groups were around 5 people, and they were randomly assigned. And don't forget, they didn't know each other. They just arrived at university, so that seemed reasonable. It turned out then, when we did our focus groups, because we actually wanted to evaluate this new assessment, that they found that quite large and difficult to coordinate 5 people. So the following year, there was effort for the groups to be a little bit smaller, like 4 to 5, I think, was what happened the following year. While in the first year it was 5, and then some groups might have even had a 6th person. So even getting everyone to meet on campus to discuss the project so as you can imagine, the more people you add, it becomes increasingly complex to coordinate and figure out how to delegate tasks. Yeah. So my takeaway from that was 4 was fine, 5 got a bit big. And then if I'm not mistaken, after I left Surrey, I'm not sure if this is true, Hannah's going to confirm maybe in the chat, I think then they changed it to, like, you can choose your friendship group, you can choose your team members, and then anyone unassigned hasn't got a group can be helped to find one. Maybe free riding went down when that happened, I don't know. So, there is, if it is people and trust, there's less of a coordination problem. But then I think one of the skills I did want people to have at the outset was, when you go and get a job, you're not going to choose your teammates. So there is some value in random assignment. Depends what you want to get out of it. Yeah.
I have to say, I mean, I do group work, not videos, but projects, and I've switched between allocating and choosing, and I've seen some friendships end in my course by people working with their friends or not. So, which is also a good lesson of sometimes you might not want to work with the people that you're friends with. Sylvia, do you want to talk about whether you had general assessment criteria and how you worked
Yes,
them
well,
out?
I have I have used quite well-known criteria, probably like economic analysis, evidence, focus, planning and research, balance, overall communication, and I had the very last one, which was technical quality. And for the audience, well, in my experience, in my assessment, what I've asked students was to communicate their ideas to students who have finished their first year economics degree. So and then, of course, the level of was set to this second intermediate level, let me say,
Yeah.
level of economic knowledge. And I was quite, I told them quite strongly that the main criteria were economic analysis, evidence, focus, balance, and the technical quality was a residual thing. And what was important with this respect was just the audio to be audible and the video to be visible. But at the end of the day, they made amazing jobs, even if they were asking for more support on the technical side at the end. But yes, the criteria were sort of an assessment, written assignment criteria. Yeah.
So if you go back to the discussion about how many people are in the group and how they coordinate, there's quite a lot going on in the chat about, well, did you set up any form for them to meet in, either in tutorials or online? And I guess thinking ahead, if you have to do this in next year or in future years where you're teaching online, what do you think the challenges of that might be, and how might you help students meet each other online? So yeah, I guess there's two parts to that. One is, in the past, did you have a sort of structure to help them meet each other in the beginning? And going forward, how do you think you might replicate that, including how you might take attendance if they have to meet and things like that online, whether in Zoom or Teams or something like that? Demetra, do you want to have a go at that?
Sure. I remember at the time what we did is we had milestones they had to complete. So for example, they had by a particular week or date, they had to have chosen a topic and that had to be approved. And then by a particular week, then they had to find a set of readings. So if you didn't give them any milestones, they might then not do things on time. And it's very easy to underestimate the level of effort needed to put together the video and then the editing. So the focus group revealed that editing the video to meet the 3-minute requirement that we had was really difficult. So, and they were afraid they would get penalized if it was over. And of course, if you struggle editing, then, you might have to refilm stuff. So we kind of anticipated that this part would be non-trivial and they would have no experience doing it. So we did set milestones, but that we could monitor, like, for example, have they chosen their topic? Have they submitted this? Have they done that? But we didn't keep a record, of where they met. We didn't tell them where to meet, but of course it was on campus. They could meet every week easily. Going forward, I think, especially also at LSE, where we do our first year challenge, and we're thinking about how to organize an online video project with people that are remotely located. But I think you're going to need some collaborative software for that. At its basic level, a Google document could do it, but I've heard good things about a software called Notion. I haven't used it, but I think we're looking into it. It creates both a log of who does what when, but also you can create materials remotely. Now, of course, in Zoom, I haven't used Teams very much, but in Zoom, you can, it records a log of who attended. So if you if students set up Zoom meetings through the university account, and then there would be logs for those meetings, they could submit the logs. So there are ways to keep track. It's just that I haven't got experience doing it, but I have a feeling we're going to need to do a bit more of that going forward.
And Sylvia, did you have any sort of organized meetings, or are you planning on having organized live sessions around the assessment?
Yes, well, in the past, what I've done was having tutorial on a particular thing that would have been useful for the video, such as making the story flows or thinking about how to structure the arguments. So we were having this tutorial, and just afterwards, the tutorial was realizing that students in the groups were already arranging the next meeting. So I could see, well, in Viva, that they were planning the meetings. As for now, well, for the future, I know that in Blackboard Collaborate, there are breakout groups, and in Zooms, there are breakout rooms, so that this sort of group working, somehow subgroup discussion within a tutorial can be done remotely as well, if well, this can be done in a synchronous way. And for what concerns, well, the way in which they can organize their meetings, maybe if depending on what we are going to use, but I guess that at UCL we are going to use Blackboard Collaborate, maybe we can teach them how to organize these breakout groups, which is very similar to breakout rooms in Zooms, or to set up the links for them and having them to meet at a certain time. Another thing we have experimented in another course was having one tutorial representative per tutorial group who was in charge of these things. So having well, not me, not the PGTA, but a student herself or himself to get the things organized for the students, and this worked very well. This was at the end of March, when students were traveling all over the place, and we couldn't manage it. So we set up 3 time zones, one for the East, one for Europe, and one for the West. And we reduced drastically the numbers of tutorial from 8 to 3, 1 per time zone, and we had 1 representative for time zone, and they meet together and they did the tutorial, and it was very good. They did the pre-work for the tutorial, actually, and this was good.
I'll just give a quick summary of some of the feedback on this on the chat. Some points about maybe it's not a great idea to lead too much and have too many meetings set up for the students, that you want them to organize themselves and self-regulate. I tend to do that, but I do have them in tutorials for other reasons. So if there's an issue, they can sort of raise a question there. Margaret, on MS Teams, I guess one option is that you could ask them to record their meetings so that you could then get the recording back from them. But they might not want you to see what they chat. I mean, I found when I did group work that I was sent sort of copies of WhatsApp messages and things like that when people said that their peers weren't contributing and things like that. Ramin, you wanted to ask a question?
My question is not about assessment per se. I'm just curious, in all the submissions, did you get any video that has an interactive element into it, that you need to click on something, a quiz or something like that? Because this is something that I'm exploring, you know, to make a video more interactive. And usually I get all of my innovations, you know, from students.
No, I didn't. Personally, I didn't.
No.
It's a good idea, actually. Marvelous idea.
You'd probably
There is a potential. Camtasia allows you to do it, and I'm just maybe ask others if they have come across something like that. You know, I think that would be an interesting evolution. Anyway, thank you.
A sort of related question from Dean about if you can sort of describe what the videos look like or what the quality was like, I guess. And if you found that the students did a good job of communicating intuitively. Dimitra, do you want to go? And I guess with
Yes.
first year challenge as much as.
I don't know if Panos will agree with me, I hope, but I was impressed by them. I was sort of, and also with the first year challenge afterwards that we've been seeing lots of videos, I'm really impressed by how amazing these videos are with their soundtrack and music coming in and very visual stuff. It's not sort of static slides. It's a lot of creativity went into them. The downside is that sometimes this kind of, the economics was crowded out. In, you know, sometimes
Slide over substance.
Yeah, sometimes we felt that was very colorful, but where exactly is the economic analysis? A lot of fun facts, you know, so the best ones perhaps were a bit drier because they did, I mean, in terms of academically, the best were maybe not necessarily the most glossy. Yeah, so I was very impressed with them. The ones, but you know, in terms of nuance, of going beyond the descriptive, that was. But don't forget, this is the very first term that they're at universities, and it's a new topic. So the idea of doing research to come up with a narrative of analysis, that I think was. So I think that's what distinguished between the excellent ones and the less good ones. The ones that went a bit beyond describing facts. Now, some of them, I mean, I remember one of them actually surveyed people on campus and presented their survey findings. It was about the sugar tax, that particular one. Yeah. Would you consume less sugary products if they introduce a tax? And then they sort of talked about elasticities and stuff. So it was interesting. But yeah. So was there more to that? And
so one of the things we find that with our first year challenge videos, there's a real variety that some people do some really good, like good ideas about how to do a video. But one of the things which is really nice now is that used to be the only video they did, whereas now they're getting to do it in Sylvia's course, and hopefully in other courses will do it. Some good questions coming in. One is, do the students get to comment on each other's videos at all? And the other one is, do they get any sense of what a good video is before they submit? So do they see examples or anything like that? So Sylvia, do you want to do the do they get to comment on each other's videos or see them? And Dimitra, maybe you can talk about giving examples.
Well, personally, I wanted them to get credit for the work they have done among their peers as well. So one tutorial was dedicated to showing the videos. And they didn't comment openly, but they were quite a lot appreciative with respect to their peers and what they have done. So it was good atmosphere. And for what concerns the examples, I've showed them the RES competition videos, which was won in 2018 by one UCL student, and they got quite inspired by it. And we watched quite a few of these videos, and we were discussing what makes a good video and what makes a less good video for explaining and digging an economics problem. Of course, this was the idea.
So that sounds like almost like if you were doing a live presentation, you just watch the videos in class. Dimitra, do you think you can replicate that moving online, that kind of idea of sharing them with each other?
So there was I mean, it's assessment, right? So there's, so before they submit it, I don't know if they should, so one has to be careful because it's a 30% assessment. On the other hand, it's a different theme, but still, before they submitted it, I don't think we did any of that. In terms of showing them examples, we were really reluctant to show them any examples, because if you show them we showed them some of the RES winners, but they're the winners. They're like the best out of a cohort. So we didn't want to make them feel pressured to produce something, you know, Oscar-winning. If someone's learning to do a film, you don't show them the Oscar winner, if you see what I mean. It might be put just a little bit of pressure. So we were a bit reluctant to do that. But when it came to the first year challenge, which is not so much an academic task, but a community builder, we did a lot of things off the back of that. So for example, this year, the plan was, so in this second year that we're in, we introduced this innovation whereby the first year challenge shortlist leads on to sort of a social event where students in the second and third year get to vote on which ones they think is the best. And they got the popular vote prize.
Okay.
Or, and then we had sort of a pizza evening where the prizes are given. And then for a very long time, we in the building, in our economics building, we have screens at the entrance, and the winners were presented on a loop, those videos. So they were given a lot of publicity because the idea was about engagement. I think there was sort of a conceptual distinction between the Surrey thing, which was an assessment, and even, we had to gain consent to project any of these videos. We did project one of them in an open day and stuff like that, and we had to get written consent, and it's an assessment. And even now, we can't share the assessment videos with you guys because they're assessments. But yeah. The other ones are a community builder, completely different type of thing, So I don't know how we can balance the two.
So Prime, I see you have your hand up, and maybe you want to say something about our first year challenge and ask your question as well.
I was going to say, I'm just kidding, just checking that the hand raising thing is working. No,
yeah.
I didn't.
No, I didn't see it. Do you have a question? Do you want to say something about first year challenge?
Well, I had so many things to say, but what I was going to say is two things. First of all, I think we're being pushed to use H5P. I don't know if anyone else is doing that. That's the interactive thing with the videos. It doesn't look great to me, but I don't know, that might be something to sort of do, both for teaching, but also for this kind of thing. I was also going to say that, sorry, there were issues before about how do we get people to come together and stuff like that. So we've been running the first year challenge for like 5 years now. And the way we run it is that first day students go to their assigned location and meet up, and there's always people missing. So even in when they're physically there, people get lost in Bloomsbury and things like that. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be very different online. And I think what we would like to do is to copy that kind of stuff as much as we can online. And the idea was that, a PGTA or someone sort of organizes the session. They're not policing or anything, but it's just a bit of a nudge to say, there's a session. We have to remember for the things like the first year challenge, these are first year students. They're coming straight from school. They're used to structure and policing. And when that's not there, there's a vacuum, right? So we need, it's kind of different for different levels of students. Final thing I was going to say is that I think Dimitra, Margaret, whoever else is doing first year challenge kind of things, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff that we're working on in parallel. So it might be a good idea to get together at some point and figure out what works best. Thanks.
Very good. We love collaboration after these sessions. I think that leads nicely to a question from Dean about, Sylvia, you obviously do second and third year mix, and Dimitri, you've done first years. Do you think there's any reason why you can't do it for later years or early? Is it not a strong enough assessment for finalists or anything like that? Sylvia, do you want to comment on that?
Well, to me, it's I see it as a very flexible assessment tool. And I think if we are going to assess students, having taught them remotely online, I think video assessment has the great advantage of being born digital. So it is digital, we don't need to adapt anything, this is the way it is. So it is very clear in a sense. And I wouldn't say that it cannot be used for finalists, as long as we are able to provide the finalists with enough support and we are clear on what we want. Basically, if we are able to provide them with a clear assessment criteria, or if we want a really deep level of economic analysis, we need to explain it to them. So I don't think it's if the assessment is on us to be able to explain ourselves.
Excellent. So we've talked a lot about your perspectives. Demetra, how do the students find the exercise, and did you get feedback from them on it, particularly around the peer assessment? Because I think sometimes doing the individual contribution can cause them to back off a bit and start getting more strategic.
Yeah, so trying to understand students' perceptions of this was sort of part of the design at the outset. So we got ethical approval from the university to run focus groups and to interview them and to do the actual students to try and understand a bit better how they perceived it. Because also at Surrey, at the time at least, there was quite a lot of multiple choice in the first year to a great extent. So there was very little opportunity for students to do anything collaborative in this way. So we really wanted to see how they perceive this in comparison to sort of other assessment. Can I share my screen, show you the results?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So just to run through them briefly, we had different ways in which we assessed students. We ran a focus group where we invited people to send a representative from each group. There were 45 groups, 22 people showed up. So 22 of the 45 groups were represented in the focus group session. But then we also sent our questionnaire to the groups that didn't show up, and we got 15 late submissions. So that's why you have two bits and pieces on this slide. And we were asked them to rate their experience from 0 to 10, where 10 is the best, of how they felt the project, this group video assessment, help them communicate, like develop skills in communicating economics, developing teamwork, and engaging with each other. Now, for some reason, the late groups generally liked everything a lot better than the people who showed up, who knows. But generally, they felt that it did succeed. It was sort of better than 5 in any case in developing these skills. But then when we asked them things about comparing different forms of assessment, so we had, this was sort of explained on the day. Easy, as in which ones are easier to engage, like easier to get through, sort of in terms of not being sort of easy and difficult in sort of what it takes to prepare for them. Unsurprisingly, multiple choice came up as the easiest. And I guess these are small samples, so you can't really tell the difference between a group video project versus a group written project. And this came up also in the discussion, that the group dimension adds a lot of complexity to coordinating and planning and getting things off the ground. So essay, they thought that was a lot more work than doing a multiple choice because they have to do research, but they do that on their own. So, in terms of, but at the same time, in terms of being engaging, the least preferred by a big margin was obviously multiple choice, not very engaging form of assessment. So in terms of so they found it engaging. So they found video groups to be engaging, but at the same time challenging. And in the sort of chat, the things that came out learning, time management, role assignment. So most people had a team leader. We didn't tell them to do it. They just did it of their own accord. And getting their head around how to coordinate the tasks took a lot of time, and concerns about free riding as well in that. Now, what I found interesting is that very few actually understood that what they were doing while researching their theme was research. They didn't understand that it was research skills. And then when we told them, but don't you think it's research skills if you're sort of looking up papers? And they said, oh, I see. They wouldn't have, if you asked them, did you develop research skills? It hadn't occurred to them that that was something. So on balance, they got a lot out of it, but it was tough. They said it was the hardest assessment in terms of the level of personal effort that had to go into it. And I think, Sylvia, you have some of your feedback as well here.
Yes, I think in terms of the sample, these are taken from the module evaluations, and it represents the 1/3 of the students enrolled in the module. And they were happy with the module overall, as well as with the coursework. And they provide with very positive comments with respect to the video, and with respect to the fact that the video was accompanied, the group video was accompanied by an individual essay. They like this. thing. And the less enthusiastic comments was that the video took a lot of time and it was difficult for them to condense a lot of thoughts, a lot of research into just 3 minutes. And someone was more keen on 100% exam, but this was just one person out of all of them. And very importantly, the suggestions. They asked for more support on the technical side of the video, as well as on more guidance on how to do better synthesis, basically, on how to be able to condense the stuff. But I think, yes, the UCL and LSE students provide us with very similar feedback.
And the Surrey students, obviously.
Yes, sure.
So Sylvia, you mentioned that they were looking for help on how to sort of prepare the videos and condense the ideas into 3 minutes. I know a lot more people who are looking for help with this now, as in all our colleagues. Are you doing anything to provide people with advice either on how to prepare videos generally and how to prepare 3-minute videos ideally, but also how to do video assessments in their courses? Is there any help that's going to be out there for them?
Well, I've just finished one set of tutorials, and I've done that thanks to the amazing collaboration with Alexandra, who is there. Say hi. So
hi, Alexandra.
Alexandra is a third-year urbanist student at UCL, and we basically designed very short tutorials on how to film and edit videos, and they are they have been designed with having the idea of supporting economics of the public sector students, but I think that they could be used by anyone, by lecturers, but also for other sort of videos in general. They're just video making and editing tools, which is, and this is, we have used free tools so that students don't need to buy anything for making their videos. And
excellent. So I think if anybody else has any.
Sorry, and for condensing the story in just 3 minutes, I think I have to work quite hard on that one.
I think we all do. Parami, you've got your hand up again. Is that just testing me, or have you got something to say? Oh, she's got her hand up and she's disappeared. That's a really good student trick, that one. Dimitri, can we go back to the peer assessment really quickly? Because I do individual contribution, but what I do is I get the students to peer assess each other 3 times in the term because the project lasts the whole term. So what I find is in the beginning, they're all being really nice to each other, and probably agree to collude and give each other all really high marks. But by the end, they start getting more honest. Do you think the individual contribution bit or the variation from the group mark changes their behavior in a good way or a not good way?
I think you mean that some people might be happy not to contribute and take a lower mark. Is that what you're?
A bit of that, but also, 3 out of the 4 in a group may decide to take against somebody.
Okay.
For non-good reasons, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah. So we did have 1 dispute in the first year out of 45 groups. So out of 45 groups, approximately half declared uneven contribution, but what I would call reasonable uneven contribution. So if there were 4 students, or let's say there were 5 students, someone had a 15% contribution rather than 20, small variations. Yeah. But there was a punitive one where they gave him 0 or something, and he said, but I didn't do 0. So there was a case of doing it punitively, and it was very clear up front that if there's ever a dispute, the lecturers will adjudicate. And and another thing that I think a tweak that we introduced was making clear that those percentages on the cover sheet have to be mutually agreed, and they have to say that yes, we've all agreed on this, because I think we kind of missed that bit perhaps in the first year, and then afterwards there was, you learn a bit.
So it's very good skill about giving each other feedback and all of that, I think. Yeah. John, you had a question? John, guess?
So yeah, sorry, I just forgotten how to unmute, because that's the sort of technological person I am. So it's just a quick comment really, and I'd be interested if everybody else has tried using Teammates, which is the University of Singapore software for doing peer evaluation in groups, which me and Dean, who's there, hello Dean, my colleague at Aston, we wanted to do a video. So we did a group assessment, a group consultancy report, first year module, very like Demetra, and we were originally going to do a video as well, but we came under a lot of pressure to drop the video when the whole lockdown thing kicked off. But we kept the group consultancy report, and we used Teammates to do the peer evaluation, and a bit like Clodagh, we did 2 formative ones during the process to sort of identify potential issues in groups. And then the students have just done a final one. Now, I haven't evaluated it yet. They've literally only just submitted it. But as a piece of software, as a user managing group work, I found it really, really useful. So I suppose it's just an open question. Has anybody else used Teammates, and did they find it useful? The approach that we've taken in terms of 40% of the mark will depend on their peer evaluation. And we've sort of tried this, I've nicked it off somebody else, that's a sort of an effort point system. So each of the students, let's say you're a group of 5, you allocate effort points to the other 4 members of the group. So let's say you've got 100 effort points. So equal ranking would be, I'll say each of the other members of the group contributed equally. I'm going to give them 25 points each. Or I can give somebody 30 points, somebody 20 points. As long as the 4 scores add up to 100, that's fine. And Teammates allows you to download the average scores on an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can quite simply weight the individual, the overall mark by this weighted contribution, which my colleague Dean, who just loves using Excel, did very, very quickly over the weekend. And I don't know if Dean wants to comment on it. I don't know.
Can I comment? Because we're going to run out of time in a minute. But so at UCL, our engineering department have created something called EconTEAching, which is the individual peer assessment component, which is like a JavaScript tool, which is accessible as well. It was created quite a few years ago, so I don't know how new Teammates is, but it sounds like it does the same thing. So what you do is you run your peer assessment in a Moodle quiz. You get the output from that, stick it into their tool, and so the students give comments as well as grading each other, and it records something called an EconTEAching score. So if you get 1, you're as expected. If you get more than 1, you're better than expected, according to your teammates. And then I'm able to use that scoring system to adjust the marks. But I do use it with other things like attendance at the tutorials that are linked to the project, and so that it's not just the peer assessment as the only bit. But people are looking for your Teammates link in the chat if you can do that. Prama, you had a question or comment?
No, sorry, I think I just forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. We've got 5 minutes, so I was just going to ask Demetra and Sylvia to both kind of wrap up by kind of giving us a marketing pitch for video assessments, I guess. So why they think they're valuable and when they think you shouldn't use them, or what warning labels they'd put on them. Sylvia, do you want to start? 60 seconds.
Well, I had a very good experience in my video assessment. I think it's flexible and innovative and very engaging for students. My main warning label is as the director, so to speak, of this video assessment. It took quite a while to get the assessment ready. So it is quite a huge effort from the design point of view. And also the support of the students can take some time. So, well.
Thank you. And Dimitra, pros and cons?
Okay, I think it enables students to develop diverse skills in a really creative way and to communicate economics in different ways, which can be useful. I think you can embed employability skills such as teamwork and planning, and also academic skills such as research. So it can be at a higher level. So I think in that sense, it sort of can achieve a range of learning objectives while being sort of fun and engaging and develop community. I guess the cons are that it might be a lot of effort for everyone involved and maybe not give enough of a window of opportunity to do that much analysis of economics within the 3 minutes, in the sense that it depends what you want to get out of it. So there was an earlier question about at what level it can be pitched. I think it can be pitched at third-year level. I have no problem. I know your course is third-year level, but you know, one would have to think the standards it would have to be more guidance to give at a higher level, I think. And the other thing is, perhaps not all courses are well suited to this. So I think ours are, I mean, Silva is very good because it's a sort of public economics policy course. So, you know, you can choose a policy and analyze it. In ours, it was a contemporary issues course, but I mean, it probably doesn't lend itself to econometrics. You know, so you might want to think about, you know, and then one final remark. I think it works really well if you allow each group to have a different topic. Not a single topic and then 50 versions of different iterations. So the course has to lend itself to allowing students to choose their own theme and yet assess the learning outcomes. And maybe that means it's only suitable in a small number of courses.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much. Before I make some housekeeping announcements, can everyone just join me in thanking the group with our traditional claps or whatever emojis you can find on Zoom? This is actually our last EconTEAching for a little while, certainly for June. And the reason for that is because there's 2 exciting conferences slash seminars coming up. I'm just going to try and share my screen just to show you what's happening. So first of all, I want to remind you that we're running a Teach Econ conference on June the 17th and 18th. You can find all the details on the CTEL website. Registration for that is in next Monday, June the 1st. Dimitra and I are also, and actually quite a few people on this call, Steffi, John, other people, are involved with organising the Economics Network virtual symposium. So how this is working is starting next Monday, June the 1st. There will be a mix of synchronous and asynchronous sessions just to get you all prepared for the world of synchronous and asynchronous. So they're going to be Monday afternoons. Material will go live 1 week, and then the following week there will be a material will go asynchronously 1 week, and there'll be a live session the next week. So for the session on June the 8th, you need to register on the Economics Network website by June the 5th. And that's very much focused on how to design your courses for teaching online, and then some real live hands-on ideas about how to teach data online and how to teach with Excel online. So they were the main announcements we needed to make. Thank you to everyone for your time. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Maddie for organising absolutely everything. And I hope you enjoy the rest of half term if you're having it, and see you all at hopefully one or more of those conference sessions.
Thank you. Thank you.